So it's been about a week since the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, and some of you may have decided, well, things can go and cool down. Maybe everything will go back to normal. Well, I'm here to tell you that normal is the problem. Normal is the way that the FBI does its business, and unfortunately, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say that every single thing that they touch is unconstitutional. But there's a serious problem with the FBI, and it can't be fixed just through looking at this one case of Donald Trump and the Mar-a-Lago raid. You see, that's a very political case, right? And there's already between 40 and 50% of the country that thinks that this is just the Donald getting his just desserts. They hate him, and they don't really have the presence of mind to think that, regardless of the fact that this is their enemy, the person that they think has ruined the country, has ruined society as a whole, has destroyed their vision of what America is supposed to be. What the FBI is doing by executing a search warrant and raiding his house, regardless of the fact, they started to say, well, we don't want to use the word raid. In fact, Frank Filiuzzi, so this guy is a clown. So Frank Filiuzzi is this FBI agent who started to say, well, we shouldn't even call this a raid. Um, Let me put this back to the front here. So MSNBC hosts contradicting each other over raid terminology after FBI seizes boxes from Trump's home. So you had people basically arguing over whether this was really a raid or not. MSNBC anchor Alicia Menendez asked former FBI agent Frank Filiuzzi on Monday night how the FBI was able to pull off this raid, in quotes. Filiuzzi, a national security contributor at MSNBC, took a shot at her use of the term in his response. Agents don't like the word raid. They don't like it. It sounds like it's some sort of extrajudicial, non-legal thing. It's an execution of a search warrant. It's a court-authorized search warrant. He said, well, I think that Frank Filiuzzi will have to learn that in um, common English, in the vernacular, you sometimes use small words in order to express longer concepts. So a raid and the execution of a search warrant are appropriate counterparts. You have the short word and you have the long expression that it is meant to signify. So up until now, there's been a lot of back and forth over what will happen. And look, I don't make videos every day. I could make videos on every single theme and every little development that happens. There was the whole issue of who will publicize the search warrant. First, Trump demanded that the FBI and the Department of Justice publish it. They then threw it back at him. In fact, I think Merrick Garland said, well, it's up to Donald Trump to publish it. Then the magistrate requested for the Justice Department to publish it. Then Merrick Garland petitioned the court to publish the search warrant. So Trump went ahead and leaked the whole thing the um, to the media, to Breitbart, I believe. In fact, let's go read a little bit of it. I'm not sure if we'll get to the main parts, so excuse me if we don't. I don't really have a ton of time here. Here we go. Read copy of unsealed warrant. So we have United States District Court, Southern District of Florida. It says the United States hereby gives notice that it is filing the following document, which is a redacted version of material previously filed in this case number under seal. So that's just the cover sheet. Says you are commanded to execute this warrant on or before August 19th, 2022, not to exceed 14 days. In the daytime, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Unless delayed notice is authorized below, you must give a copy of the warrant and a receipt for the property taken to the person from whom or from whose premises the property was taken, or leave the copy and receipt at the place where the property was taken. The officer executing this warrant or an officer present during the execution of the warrant must prepare an inventory as required by law and promptly return this warrant and inventory to the duty magistrate. So then it gives his address. The premises to be searched, 1100 South Ocean Boulevard, Palm Beach, Florida, is further described as a resort club and residence located near the intersection of Southern Boulevard and South Ocean Boulevard. It is described as a mansion with approximately 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms on a 17-acre estate. The locations to be searched include the 45 office, all storage rooms, and all other rooms or areas within the premises used or available to be used by the former president of the United States and his staff, and in which boxes or documents could be stored, including all structures or buildings on the estate. It does not include areas currently, i.e., at the time of the search, being occupied, rented, or used by third parties, such as Mar-a-Lago members, and not otherwise used or available to be used by former president of the United States and his staff, such as private guest suites. And it says all physical documents and records constituting evidence, contraband, fruits of crime, or other items illegally possessed in violation of 18 U.S. Criminal Code. So anyway, it goes through the whole thing. It says any physical documents with classification markings, along with any containers, boxes, including any other contents in which such documents are located, as well as other containers, boxes are collectively stored or found together with the aforementioned documents and container boxes. So then as a receipt of all of that, and that's about it. So this was what the court was trying to say, or sorry, the FBI and the Department of Justice was trying to say they couldn't release. Well, the truth of the matter is that the warrant itself basically is trying to say that Donald Trump, and this is probably something that you all know by now, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating something that's old in the news, but that Donald Trump absconded from the White House with classified documents and sensitive materials that could be subject to some of the same laws of mishandling classified information that were involved in the Hillary Clinton probe. You'll remember that she had 33,000 emails that were never recovered. There were a number of classified documents on her private server, as well as on the laptop of her assistant's husband, Anthony Weiner, or maybe it was her laptop. But in any case, there were a lot of classified documents that were mishandled there. And yet, now the media is saying, well, this is Donald's turn. He has to squirm because he actually mishandled classified documents, whereas she did not mishandle them. That is the peak of BS. And let me tell you why. Okay, this is something maybe you've also heard before. As Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton had less privilege to designate what is classified or unclassified, right? I believe that she still had some ability to do that when it concerns information that was really under the control of the State Department. But when it concerns matters that are pertaining to the entire intelligence community and to U.S. national security, the president has the highest degree of discretion over which materials could be considered classified or not. So, like it or not, justified or not, and good judgment or not, Donald Trump has greater discretion to determine what is classified or unclassified than any other person in the country, so long as he's president. Now, obviously, President Biden is the president today. He holds the power today. So people are obviously at each other's throats over this. I want to take a step into the past and talk to you a little bit about previous areas where the FBI sorely overreached in its attempts to enforce the law, if you want to call it that. There was the whole issue with Richard Jewell. Okay, Louis Free is the real culprit in the Richard Jewell story. This is from the Washington Post, and they were publishing this in the wake of the release of the movie Richard Jewell. And I personally would strongly recommend you watch that movie. Very good performances from I think it was Aaron Eckhart, um, Kathy Bates as Richard Jewell's mother, and John Hamm as the FBI agent. He goes under a pseudonym in the movie, but it's actually a very compelling film, and Sam Rockwell as the attorney for Richard Jewell. And people have pointed fingers for years as to who really was the person who should bear the culpability for what happened here. A person who actually helped to save some people's lives during the Atlanta Olympic bombing. He ended up becoming the main suspect. Now, you always have to explore every single possible lead, and certainly the person in Richard Jewell's case, he was a security guard who discovered the bomb. You still have to explore the possibility that the same person who averted the the major tragedy could have been the person who caused it, right? In the movie. And according to media reports surrounding this, the FBI overreached to a great degree here. They basically made his life a living hell. They tried to turn various friends and acquaintances of him into informants against him. And that's what the FBI does. And I'm going to be writing a little bit more about the FBI, going forward. There are a lot of people now going in on the FBI. This was actually a piece I started working on a couple months ago that hopefully I'll try to get released next week. But people are very mad at the FBI now. People have been mad for years. The FBI was deeply involved in the whole issue of the Russian collusion narrative and James Comey's uh, blatant interference in the 2020 in the 2016 election. Um, whether it was his decision not to prosecute Hillary Clinton or not to recommend prosecution for her, and thereby insinuate the FBI into the election cycle by declaring whether she was criminally culpable, which is not the FBI's job. That is really the job of a U.S. attorney or a different prosecutor from within the Justice Department. They get to decide whether to attempt to prosecute or not. And if they did not want to do that, people are still entitled to criticize it, but our hands are tied. Then James Comey also was one of the people who continued to cast doubt on whether Donald Trump was a clean candidate by saying, well, I don't really know. He was saying this for months and months, and even to this day, after the 2016 election, saying that he's not sure whether Donald Trump was an agent of the Kremlin or not. Look, as the head of the FBI, you have the powers and the capabilities put before you in order to investigate a matter and come to a conclusion. And if you can't come to a conclusion, you can't then just sow a lot of, um, chatter and raise more questions by saying, well, I don't know what's true or what's not. You have to come forward and say, I can't prove these allegations to be true. And if you can't prove those allegations to be true, then your role there is done. I don't think James Comey ever realized that. There's a scene, and I'm going to have to play it at higher speed. So you'll forgive me. But yeah, here we go. This is from Richard Jewell. And I don't know whether it exactly played out like this, but it is one of the more interesting portions of the movie where you really see the way the FBI treats people when it thinks that it can solve a problem for itself. These are institutionalists. These are people who see you as a citizen as a person who is an obstacle to the goal that they want to have they need a body, they need a person to be thrown into the cellar and blamed for a certain problem. So here we go.
Holy. You don't talk. I talk. They're just gonna look around. You got any guns in the house?
Yeah, we're in Georgia.
Yeah, of course you do. Go get them. Lay them on your bed so we can see them. We don't want any surprises.
How many of them are coming in here?
There's a couple.
Can they leave their shoes outside the door?
Well, I could ask them, Bobby. I don't know if they would oblige.
Oh, God.
Oh, good Lord. Were you expecting a zombie invasion or something?
No, I wasn't expecting zombies. I expect deer. I hunt.
You hunt. Okay. Radar, let me explain something to you. All you're guilty of right now is looking like the kind of guy who might set off a bomb. But everything you do that promotes that image is going to hang us. Sorry. Poor choice of words. Those jackals out there, they want your ass on a chopping block. Is there anything else odd or quirky or fucking weird that I'm going to discover today?
Yeah, kinda. I haven't paid my taxes in about a couple of years.
This gets better and better.
Guns, guns, guns. I hate guns. Like every time Richard goes hunting, I say, don't you dare drag a dead Bambi in here. I don't want to eat Bambi. But you know what? Richard, when he was deputy with the Habersham County Sheriffs, he got 98 out of 100 on his shooting test. It was awesome. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Okay.
Dear God.
You don't talk. I talk. Say it.
I don't talk. But I want those guys to know that I'm law enforcement too, just like them.
See, right there, that's talking. That's what we don't want, okay?
You picked the right lawyer, Richard.
We all set?
Yeah.
Right, let's go. Come on. We'll start in the back. Bring it in. Let's go. By the numbers, everybody. By the numbers. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so you guys go ahead and take everything. Take the carpet, whatever you need. I'm law enforcement too, so I get it. Just know that whatever you take, it's just going to prove that I didn't do anything.
Yeah, we've done this before.
So at the end of the scene, you see like Sam Rockwell's character is like, "Damn it! Why did you have to say something?" That is the problem when you're talking about being criminally investigated. That's a problem I think that Donald Trump's lawyers deal with all the time. They're like, "Why can't he just shut the f up?" Because while we as citizens, we look at him, he's a politician, he's a political figure, he's a businessman. They look at him as a client, and their basic goal is to be able to clear him of any civil or criminal penalties. And then when he opens his mouth, when he says something that could be legally compromising, it's a real problem for a lawyer. And when it comes to the FBI, that's an even bigger issue. Okay, so we just looked at a clip from Richard Jewell. Richard Jewell was in retrospect, he was completely innocent. This was a stitch up. The FBI was looking for a person to be the fall guy for a crime that would ultimately take them years to solve. They ended up catching a guy in North Carolina named Eric Robert Rudolph a few years later, who was responsible for the Centennial Park bombing. But the problem that we're talking about here is that you might know that you're innocent in your head. The people that are coming to investigate you, they don't care whether you're innocent or not. They care about finding a guilty party, even if that guilty party is only a stand-in for the person who actually committed the crime. It says here, prosecutor reveals in an interview how he helped clear Richard Jewell's name in Olympic bombing investigation. This is from the American Bar Association Journal. So you see a lot of people nowadays, I mean, there's a saying, I think it's attributed to an Italian fascist politician, but the saying goes that success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. So now that the whole Richard Jewell saga is proven to have been one of uh, whether mistaken identity or a deliberate attempt to frame a person, now there are people who come out of the woodwork and say, hey, I helped to clear his name. I deserve some accolades too. Well, it would have been better if it had never happened before. But here's what happened. Kent Alexander called it the most difficult letter to write in my career, explaining that it took days and he recast it dozens of times. Curiously, when he finished, the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia signed his name below just 3 sentences. Alexander's succinct but painstaking correspondence was penned to Richard Jewell's lawyer, informing him that his client was not considered a target of the criminal investigation of the bombing at the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. Jewell was an unemployed small town cop working as a security guard at Centennial Olympic Park. In the early hours of July 27th, 1996, he spotted a suspicious backpack under a bench in the crowded park. Jewell acted quickly and with the help of a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent, cleared the crowd away from the explosive device. 10 minutes later, it detonated and 2 people died, but Jewell's actions unquestionably saved scores of lives. Jewell was proclaimed a hero. CNN, USA Today, and Television's Today came calling, but then law enforcement turned the tables and began to suspect Jewell as the bomber. His name was leaked to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as a suspect. 3 days later, the hometown paper's front page headline screamed, FBI suspects, quote, hero guard may have planted the bomb. Boom, just like that, Jewell was reviled by the media, shredded by late-night comics, and all but convicted in the eyes of the public. Alexander, following a massive FBI investigation, cleared him 3 months later, but Jewell's old life was never coming back. As the Fed's top lawyer in Atlanta, Alexander was in the middle of it all. After the bombing, the FBI became my second home, he tells me in an interview by phone. All of us were singularly focused on finding the terrorists before he struck again. Alexander's behind-the-scenes account of Jewell's story is told in The Suspect, co-authored with former Wall Street Journal editor Kevin Salwin, who oversaw the paper's coverage of the bombing. The authors also take readers inside law enforcement's 7-year search for the real bomber, Eric Rudolph, who pled guilty to the Olympic bombing and 3 subsequent ones. Rudolph is serving life in prison. I knew I was going to write this book a week and a half after I wrote Richard Jewell's clearance letter. Alexander, so this is how warped his thinking is. His office basically made a living hell out of the life of this suspect, an innocent suspect, and he he gets finished writing a letter clearing the suspect, and then he decides, well, I'm going to write a book about it. Can you imagine how vindictive this is? And look, I think the film was a great film, but I want to understand, did Kent Alexander at any point think that Richard Jewell was guilty? And what did he do in order to clear his name? He also wanted to examine what lessons could be learned from an experience that ruined an innocent man's life. For that, Alexander's 20-plus year delay in keeping his promise to himself proved handy. Much of what happened in 1996 applies even more today. Now it's easy for the Jewell effect to happen on any given day, Alexander says. At the end of last year, a month after the book's release, the Clint Eastwood-directed film Richard Jewell hit theaters. As a full-screen credit declares, the cinematic version of the hero-to-villain story is based on Alexander and Salwin's work. It can be a tall task to keep readers' interest in a book where they know the ending before starting, but Alexander and Salwin figured out how to pull it off, and very well. The story's key players were so strong, and so then, they go into all this stuff of, the fluff about, oh, this is how hard it is to write the book and whatever. Playing the part of the media run amok is Kathy Scruggs, described in the book as the provocative, edgy, and unrelenting Atlanta Journal-Constitution crime reporter who got the tip about Jewell. There were serious questions within the AJC about whether to run the story naming Jewell as a suspect according to the book, but there were 15,000 journalists from around the world in town covering the games. Describing the pressure to publish it, Alexander and Salwin write, Scruggs feared the worst. One of the carpetbagger journalists in for the Olympics would break the news in her town and on her beat. So that's what's really the problem here. So I can't keep going longer, I just wanted to summarize this whole topic. We live in an environment where the president of the United States, former president in this case, Donald Trump, is a person suspected by much of the public and by much of the law enforcement and intelligence agencies to be this enemy of theirs. Okay, now they don't have a crime to pin on him necessarily, but they will find a crime. And so they recycle this whole use of the press and the organs of law enforcement on him all the time. They were doing it during his presidency, during the Russian collusion episodes, during the impeachment sagas. Okay, now during the January 6th hearing, now during this whole Mar-a-Lago raid. So, and what will they usually say? They will come up with excuses. They're saying, well, this is the story of a century, a president who is a criminal, a president who may be convicted of the Espionage Act. Back then, it was a president who was a sexual harasser. It was a president who was violating the Emoluments Clause. It was a president who might be a white supremacist. It was a president who might be addicted to cocaine. You can go on and on. How many different scoops were there by members of the media? The Gorilla Channel. Do you remember that one? Let me prove to you that this. So some of you might have forgotten. So there was a story that Donald Trump got into the White House and got mad because there was there was no Gorilla Channel at the White House. So it says, internet falls for Trump Gorilla Channel parody. Amid the cascade of revelations from Michael Wolff's incendiary book about the Trump administration, one Twitter user posted a screenshot Thursday night of what looked like an especially stunning excerpt. It described how the president, on his first night in office, had complained that White House televisions did not carry the Gorilla Channel and that Trump spent hours a day watching guerrilla programming his staff subsequently produced to satisfy his simian appetite. The excerpt, of course, was satire, but that was not clear to the countless people who spread it like wildfire across the internet, where the gag commingled with actual claims from the book, including that Trump prefers McDonald's because he fears being poisoned, and that he once failed to recognize former House Speaker John Boehner. So this is the issue that I'm talking about, that people are so eager to believe the evil that they think is attributed to this person, to Donald Trump, that they are credulous of even the most absurd allegations. Pissing prostitutes on a bed in Moscow, all of those things that they're trying to attribute to him. Only a tiny fraction have ever proven to have any substance, and many of them, they simply don't care whether they're true or not. There was the whole thing where they accused him of telling people to inject bleach in order to cure the coronavirus. There was the whole issue of them thinking that he was telling people to ingest fish tank cleaner because he was telling people to take hydroxychloroquine and zinc. Okay, he was calling it HCQ. I think the bottom line is that they'll take a story, they'll exaggerate a small, minute detail and turn it into basically a worldwide scandal. And that's how you have this danger of the country being ripped apart by an organization like the FBI, where institutionalists, people like Christopher Wray, people like the ones on TV, Frank Filiuzzi, who are simply dedicated to this goal of tearing this person apart because he's the enemy, rather than seeking the truth, rather than pursuing justice. And if their goal is not pursuing justice, why is it even called the Department of Justice? Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to all of the channels on the link tree below, and I'll talk to you later.